My son left me on an island in the middle of the Atlantic penniless, without papers 8,000 miles from home. He thought I'd be stuck there long enough for him to seize my $850,000 house. 5 days later, when he opened the door to the house that he thought was his, I was standing right behind that door, and I said, "Surprise, son, you're back just in time. I've been waiting." This story starts quietly, but it won't leave you unchanged. Before we begin, drop a quick comment for me. What are you doing while you listen, working, driving, or just taking a moment for yourself? I read every comment, and your thoughts truly matter. Some details are fictionalized for storytelling. Any resemblance to real events is coincidental. The lesson is what matters. The dock was empty when I returned, and I knew immediately that my son had left me here to die. St. Helena Island stretched behind me 800 miles of Atlantic Ocean between this British territory and the nearest continent. The resort boat that had carried us here a week ago was gone. The water was calm. No wake, no engine sound fading into distance. Just absence where the 42-foot charter vessel should have been moored. I stood there for 30 seconds, counting my heartbeats, a habit from 40 years of manufacturing negotiations when staying calm meant survival. At 63, I'd spent the last 3 years in quiet retirement after selling my manufacturing equipment company, never imagining that my son would see that security as an opportunity to take everything I had left. The dock wood was hot under my palm. August sun reflecting off dark water, salt smell mixing with diesel residue. I turned and walked back toward the resort main building, legs steady despite the adrenaline. The boat. I asked the attendant at the entrance, a young man in a white polo shirt who'd checked us in 7 days ago. "Your party checked out 2 hours ago, sir," he said, consulting a tablet. 11:30 departure. "But I'm part of that party. I'm the father." His expression shifted from professional courtesy to cautious concern. "The gentleman said you'd arranged separate transport." He settled the full bill. My son Corbin, 38 years old, had lived in my Seattle house rent-free for 2 years, claiming he was between jobs, while I later learned he was drowning in $47,000 of debt. His wife Saskia, 35, had been married to Corbin for 6 years and possessed the kind of cold precision that made her more dangerous than my son. She was always calculating 3 moves ahead. I dismissed their whispers during the vacation as stress. The way they'd stopped talking when I entered the resort restaurant. How Saskia had offered to hold my passport for safekeeping after I mentioned the room safe felt flimsy. Small details that seemed helpful until you assembled them into a pattern. He suggested finding the island's only artisan wine. I said more to myself than the attendant. As a souvenir. 3 hours earlier, on what was supposed to be our final afternoon before flying home tomorrow, Corbin had approached me at breakfast. The resort terrace overlooked volcanic cliffs descending to black sand beaches. Coffee was strong and bitter. Tropical birds I couldn't name called from trees I didn't recognize. "Dad, there's this wine shop the concierge mentioned. Island specialty. Should we grab a bottle before we fly out tomorrow?" Saskia had been packing in the room. She'd waved without turning around when I knocked to say we were going. "Have fun." The local guide Corbin had hired met us at the trailhead, a thin man in his 50s who introduced himself only as Joseph. He led us inland through forest trails that narrowed as we climbed. 40 minutes. I counted my steps like I always did, a manufacturer's habit of measuring everything. 3,200 steps. The wine shop was boarded up. Windows dark behind weathered planks. No sign, no indication it had been open in years. "The shop was closed for a long time, sir," Joseph said, looking confused. "Maybe 2-3 years. I take you back." He'd accepted cash from Corbin that morning. Disappeared down the trail the moment we reached the resort perimeter, walking faster than necessary. How long had Corbin been planning this day's weeks? The entire vacation, I replayed each interaction, searching for the moment I should have seen it. The way he'd insisted on this specific island. How he'd handled all the booking. His enthusiasm about spending time together after Mom died last year. Grief he'd barely shown at her funeral suddenly transformed into filial devotion. I stood in the resort lobby trying to organize facts into action. The afternoon had become evening. The building's air conditioning raised goosebumps on my forearms, still damp from the walk. I need to make a call, I told the front desk attendant. She directed me to a house phone. I picked up the receiver and realized I didn't know anyone's number by memory anymore. Everything stored in my smartphone, which was in my room, or had been. I took the stairs 2 at a time despite my knee complaining. The room was stripped, beds made. My suitcase is gone. Corbin and Saskia's belongings are gone. The safe hung open and empty. Back downstairs, I asked for my room key to be reactivated. The resort manager appeared instead, Marcus Vance, a man in his 40s with graying temples, and the apologetic efficiency of someone who'd seen family betrayals play out in paradise before. Mr. Harrington, there's a delicate matter. I need to speak with you privately. His office smelled like coffee and paperwork. He gestured to a leather chair. I remained standing. Your son settled the full account when he checked out. He also informed us you've been experiencing some confusion, memory issues. He was concerned about your welfare. I'm not confused. I'm sure you're not, sir. However, when I attempted to process a hold on your credit card for Incidental's standard procedure, the transaction was declined. I called the bank. Your account has been flagged. Flagged? For suspected cognitive impairment requiring family verification before access can be restored. The entry twist landed like a fist. This wasn't opportunistic abandonment. This was architectural. Corbin had called my bank before we'd ever left Seattle. He'd built the cage before leading me into it. I checked my pockets. Wallet gone, passport gone, phone gone. $23 in cash money I'd tucked in my front pocket that morning for the wine shop that didn't exist. I can't allow you to remain in the room without payment, Marcus said quietly. I'm sorry, I truly am. My family member just left me on this island with nothing, I said. Your son mentioned you might be confused. He left this number for emergencies, a medical contact in Las Vegas. Las Vegas, 7,000 miles from St. Helena. Corbin hadn't just abandoned me. He'd fled to the opposite side of the continent to celebrate. I'd spent 40 years building a business on trust. My son had spent 40 days destroying me with it. Marcus printed the Las Vegas number on resort letterhead and handed it to me. The paper felt expensive, quality stock. Everything about this place spoke of luxury I could no longer access. There's a small motel in town, Marcus offered. Paolo offered. Very basic, $18 a night. I can call them. I stood on the edge of St. Helena Island with $23 in my pocket, no documents, no way home, and no one who knew I was here. Somewhere in Las Vegas, 7,000 miles away, my son was opening champagne. He'd thought of everything, but he didn't know everything. The thing Corbin didn't know about was sewn into my belt. I walked away from Paolo's office toward the fisherman's pier on the island's south end, away from the resort lights. Atlantic wind carried salt and diesel and the particular emptiness of being alone where no one expected you to exist. My legs moved automatically while my mind inventoried resources. $23, no documents, no bank access, a son in Las Vegas who believed I'd be stranded for days. But in 2018, during a negotiation in Milwaukee, my phone had died at the exact moment a supplier tried to back out of a 6-figure contract. I'd lost the deal. Learned the lesson. 6 months later, I'd had a custom belt made with a pocket sewn into the leather lining. Inside a burner phone. Insurance against disaster. I unbuckled the belt in the darkness and felt for the thing my son didn't know existed. The phone was there, smaller than my palm screen cracked from 7 years of compression, but when I pressed the power button, the display lit up. 12% battery. Trust had been my weakness. Preparation had been my salvation. The man I was in business had just saved the man I'd become in retirement. The pier extended 20 yards into dark water. Fishing boats knocked against rubber bumpers with each wave. I sat on a concrete piling and opened the phone's contact list. Empty except for one number I'd memorized: Vernon Caldwell, my neighbor in Seattle, the friend who'd helped me move furniture after my wife died. I typed carefully. They left me. Atlantic Island. Need help. Don't tell anyone. Sent. I turned the phone off to preserve battery. 11% now. The night stretched ahead with the weight of uncertainty. I checked every 30 minutes. No response. Vernon might be asleep. The message might not have gone through. International texts sometimes failed. Cold settled into my bones despite the tropical latitude. August in the South Atlantic still dropped to 50 degrees after sunset. I had a polo shirt and khaki pants. No jacket. Corbin had suggested I pack light. Another piece of the architecture. Fishermen's boats bobbed in the harbor, all locked. I considered breaking in for shelter, decided the risk of police involvement outweighed the comfort. Better cold and free than warm and detained. How do you measure a night when rescue might come at dawn or never come at all? I'd spent 40 years preparing for business disasters. Product recalls, supply chain collapses, lawsuits, competitor sabotage. Never imagined the disaster would be my own blood, planned with the attention to detail I'd once taught him to admire. The phone showed 10:47 p.m., then 11:23, then 12:41. I rationed the battery like water in a desert, turning it on just long enough to check for messages. 11%, 10%, 9. No response from Vernon. The embassy would open at 8. U.S. consular services maintained regular hours, even here. The problem was identification. They'd want documents I didn't have, verification I couldn't provide. Emergency passport processing took 3 to 5 business days minimum. I ran the timeline. Corbin was in Las Vegas now, probably checking into a casino hotel. Saskia beside him. They'd celebrate tonight, sleep, late tomorrow, gamble. They thought I had no way off this island for a week at least. That was their margin of safety. My margin was narrower. Dawn came slowly, the sky shifting from black to gray to pale orange. Seabirds started their morning noise. The harbor smell changed as boats prepared for departure, diesel engines coughing to life nets being hauled aboard, men calling to each other in loud voices. I stood from the concrete piling. My back ached. My knee was stiff. But I was alive, which was more than Corbin had planned. A fishing boat motored toward the pier, smaller than most single-mast, weathered blue paint. The captain cut the engine and drifted the last 10 feet, throwing a rope over a cleat with practiced ease. He saw me and froze. I must have looked like exactly what I was, a man who'd spent the night on a pier with no belongings. He climbed onto the dock, slowly watching me carefully. "Are you American?" He said the words broken. "Need help?" I nodded. "Yes, I need help." He stepped closer, studying my face in the early light. Then his eyes dropped to my hands. I'd been rubbing my left palm without thinking, an old habit when I was cold. The surgical scar that ran from my thumb to my wrist was visible, pale and slightly raised. A forklift accident from 2003 that had required a traveling surgeon to reconstruct torn ligaments. The fisherman's expression changed. He touched his own left hand, then pointed at mine. "Yeah, my father," he said, struggling with English. "You pay doctor, long time before. He tell story many times. Memory surfaced. A factory tour in Portugal, 2003, when I'd been expanding supplier relationships. Local manufacturing partner's father had been injured loading equipment. Crushed hand. The company's insurance was tied up in bureaucracy. I'd paid for the surgery out of pocket $4,000 because waiting meant permanent disability. I'd forgotten about it a month later. Business expense. Everett Valencia, 42, captained a small fishing boat and had heard his father's story about the American businessman who'd paid for life-saving surgery 1,000 times. When he saw the scar on my hand, he knew exactly who I was. "Your father survived?" I asked. Everett nodded, eyes bright. "Because of you. Now I help. Here, phone. Call anyone." He pulled a smartphone from his pocket and pressed it into my hand. No hesitation. No questions about why I was stranded or what had happened. Just recognition and reciprocity. Everett didn't speak much English, and I didn't speak Portuguese, but when he pressed his phone into my hand and pointed toward the town where the American flag flew above a small consulate building, no translation was needed. I was going home. My son had 48 hours before I walked through my front door. The hardest part of explaining what my son had done was keeping my voice steady enough that the woman behind the desk understood I wasn't confused, just betrayed. Everett had driven me to the U.S. Embassy in his truck, salt-crusted and smelling of fish. He'd waited in the parking lot while I climbed the stairs to the consular section. The building was small, just 3 rooms, the American flag hanging in still air above a hand-painted sign, Claire Brennan. The consular officer behind the desk had the kind of practiced compassion that comes from 20 years helping stranded Americans in crisis. She knew when someone was telling the truth. She was maybe 50, gray hair, pulled back reading glasses on a chain around her neck. "Tell me what happened, Mr. Harrington," she said, pen ready above a form. "Start from the beginning." I sat in the metal chair across from her and laid out the facts without embellishment. The vacation, the wine shop that didn't exist, the empty dock, the frozen bank account with the cognitive impairment flag, the missing documents. But my son left me at a dock with $23 and took everything: passport, phone, wallet, bank access. He wanted me stranded here, Claire wrote steadily, not looking up. When I finished, she set down her pen. "I need to verify your identity through federal databases. That will take about 20 minutes. Then we can process an emergency passport." "How long?" Shakti Cox. 3 business days minimum. We can issue $600 from the Emergency Assistance Fund to cover the passport fee, temporary lodging, and a flight home. You'll pay it back when you reach Seattle. 3 days. I did the math immediately. Today was August 17th. Passport ready by August 20th. 1 flight with connections, 9 hours total. I could be home by the evening of the 20th. 28 years building a business taught me one thing: never let emotion show when you're calculating how to survive. 3 days, I said. That works. Claire processed the paperwork with the efficiency of someone who'd done it hundreds of times. Fingerprints. Photos against a white wall. Affidavit explaining the circumstances. Emergency contact. I gave Vernon's number, hoping he'd finally seen my message. She handed me a receipt and a temporary identification card. "Now check back Wednesday morning. 8 a.m. We'll have your passport ready." Outside, the August sun was already hot. Everett was waiting by his truck, smoking a cigarette. I thanked him, shook his hand. He nodded and drove away without asking for anything in return. Karma completed its circle. I walked back toward town, doing timeline calculations with the precision I'd once used for supply chain logistics. Corbin and Saskia had abandoned me on August 15th. They'd flown to Las Vegas that same day. I'd heard Paulo mention the emergency contact there. Typical Vegas vacation ran 5 to 7 days. Even if they cut it short, They wouldn't return to Seattle before August 22nd, at the earliest. More likely, the 24th. I could be home by August 20th. 48 hours. 48 hours to prepare before they walked through the door expecting an empty house and a missing father. The advantage was everything. In business, whoever moved first with better information usually won. Corbin thought I was stranded for weeks. He'd be slow, confident, careless. I'd be waiting. The motel Claire had recommended was 6 blocks from the embassy, a 2-story building with peeling yellow paint and a hand-lettered sign advertising rooms for $15 a night. The lobby smelled like disinfectant, fighting a losing battle against mildew. The proprietor, an elderly woman who didn't ask questions, took my temporary ID and $45 for 3 nights. She handed me a key attached to a wooden block. Room 4, upstairs, 6 bunks, shared. The room was exactly what $15 bought: 6 metal bunk beds, thin mattresses, 1 window with a broken blind concrete floor. 2 other occupants, a young backpacker asleep in the corner, and a man in his 40s sitting on the opposite bunk scrolling through his phone. I took the bunk nearest the window and sat down. The mattress creaked. The man across from me glanced up, nodded, went back to his phone. I was arranging my few possessions. The burner phone, Everett's business card, the embassy receipt, when I caught a glimpse of the man's phone screen. A photo. Professional headshot. I recognized the face immediately. Corbin. I kept my expression neutral. Looking for someone. The man looked up, assessing whether I was worth talking to. Wade Townsend, 46, made his living as a private lender operating in the legal gray area between banks and loan sharks, the kind of man who tracked debtors across continents with the patience of a predator. You know this guy? Wade asked, turning his phone toward me. American, mid-30s, borrowed $47,000, stopped returning calls 6 months ago. $47,000. The number landed like a punch. I kept my voice casual. What makes you think he's here? He's not. I'm tracking his wife's credit card. Atlantic Resort checked out 2 days ago. Trying to intercept before he disappears again. Wade put his phone down. Waste of time, probably. But when someone owes you that much money, you chase every lead. How long has he been in default? 8 months. Started missing payments last December. Promised he'd have the money by spring, then summer, then stopped answering entirely. Wade stretched out on his bunk. The debt spread across multiple cards. I consolidated it for him at 15% better than the 30% he was paying. But he hasn't made a single payment since. Greed is a fire you can put out with reason. Desperation is water closing over your head. It makes men do things that destroy everyone, including themselves. My son didn't want my house out of greed. He needed it because he was drowning. That made him more dangerous than a villain. It made him unpredictable. What will you do if you find him? I asked. Wade shrugged. Legal options first. Judgment garnishment line on assets. If he owns property, I can force a sale. If not, he didn't finish the sentence. Corbin didn't own property, but he thought he did now. He thought he owned my house worth $850,000. That's why he'd risked everything on this plan. I lay down on my bunk as evening fell. The motel room grew dark except for Wade's phone screen glowing across from me. The backpacker snored in the corner. Somewhere in Las Vegas, Corbin thought he was celebrating freedom from debt by stealing my house. He didn't know the man hunting him was 6 feet away from his father. He didn't know I had Wade's phone number memorized from the business card visible in his wallet on the nightstand. And he definitely didn't know I was coming home. I couldn't sleep, because I kept asking myself the same question: when exactly had my son decided to destroy me? Wade Townsend snored across from me in the motel darkness. The backpacker in the corner had left that afternoon. The room smelled like disinfectant and mildew, the August heat turning the space into something close to a sauna despite the open window. I lay on my back, staring at water stains on the ceiling, and the memory surfaced unbidden. 1 month ago, July 15th, a Tuesday afternoon. I'd been in my living room reading the newspaper, late afternoon sun coming through the bay windows that overlooked Capitol Hill. The house was quiet. My wife had died the year before. I'd gotten used to the silence. The knock on the door was casual. 3 taps. I opened it and found Corbin standing there with a white paper bag in one hand and his laptop bag slung over his shoulder. "Brought your favorite pastrami on rye from Goldberg's," he said, smiling. "Figured we could go over some paperwork while we eat." Goldberg's Delicatessen had been my lunch spot for 30 years when the business was still running. Corbin knew that. He'd grown up eating their sandwiches at my desk during summer breaks when I'd bring him to work. "You didn't have to do that," I said, but I was already stepping aside to let him in. He set the bag on the coffee table and pulled out his laptop. When he opened it, the screen was already awake. A document filled the display. He connected a small black signature pad to the USB port, the kind lawyers and banks used for electronic signatures. Everything ready before he'd even knocked. "What's this about?" I asked, unwrapping my sandwich. The smell of pastrami and mustard and fresh rye bread filled the room, exactly how I'd always ordered it. "Hi, Tew, just updating your asset protection documents for the LLC," Corbin said, clicking through pages on the screen. "Routine stuff. IRS requires annual review. Your attorney sent these over last week. I said I'd walk you through them since I was coming by anyway." The LLC. The Asset Protection Trust. I'd set up 2 years ago on my financial advisor's recommendation. Standard practice for retirees with significant assets. Protected the house from liability, provided some tax advantages. I'd filed the paperwork and basically forgotten about it. "Annual review section," I said. It sounded right. Official. The kind of thing that required signatures and dates. Yeah, nothing complicated. Just confirming the property address, trustee information, beneficiary designations. Corbin scrolled through the document. The text was small on the laptop screen. Dense paragraphs, legal language. "Sign here, and initial here." He pointed to the signature pad. A red X marked where my signature should go. I picked up the stylus, took a bite of sandwich, chewed, signed. The action took 3 seconds. The document advanced to the next page. Another red X appeared. And here, I signed again. The pastrami was perfect, not too much fat, good rye, spicy mustard. I was thinking about the sandwich more than the document. Corbin scrolled to a 3rd page. "Want to initial here for the property description?" I initialed. The whole process took maybe 90 seconds. Corbin closed the laptop. "Oh, done. That was easy." He pulled out his own sandwich and sat back on the couch. "So, Bahamas in August. Should be beautiful. Saskia found this resort on St. Helena Island, volcanic cliffs, black sand beaches, totally off the grid. We ate lunch, talked about the vacation. He mentioned the wine shop, the hiking trails, how nice it would be to spend a week together. Quality time. Father and son. We hadn't done that since his mother's funeral. He finished his sandwich, packed up his laptop, left after 20 minutes. I never asked for a printed copy of what I'd signed. Never questioned what attorney had supposedly sent the documents. Never checked my email for confirmation. Never called anyone to verify. In business, I'd spent 40 years reading contracts word by word, questioning every clause, having lawyers review everything twice before I signed. With my son, I'd signed an electronic screen without reading a single sentence. Love makes you stupid in ways that greed never could. Lying in the motel bunk in the present, I could see it all clearly now. The laptop already open when he arrived, the signature pad already connected, the sandwich from my favorite place nostalgia weaponized, the casual mention of the LLC to trigger recognition and trust, the small screen making the text hard to read, the quick scrolling, the immediate pivot to vacation talk once the signing was done, every detail designed, every element staged. I'd asked when my son decided to destroy me. The answer was at least a month before the abandonment. Maybe longer. The document he'd had me sign wasn't LLC paperwork. It was a deed, a transfer of ownership, a gift, probably. Something that made the house his while I ate pastrami and thought about black sand beaches. Trust is like water. It fills every space you give it until you can't remember what life was like before you drank from that well. And when someone poisons it, you can't just stop drinking. You drown from the inside first. I'd signed. I'd believed. My only 2 mistakes in 40 years of business compressed into 90 seconds on a Tuesday afternoon. But lying there in the darkness, reconstructing the memory frame by frame, I realized something else. Corbin had controlled everything about that interaction. The document presentation, the scrolling speed, the explanations, the distraction of food and vacation planning, the immediate departure. I'd never seen a printed copy, never received an email confirmation, never been given a chance to review the document after signing. He'd extracted my signature and left, taking all evidence with him. That meant he'd filed something with the county. Some document claiming I'd voluntarily transferred my property to him. But what exactly? A deed of gift, a sale at nominal value, a trust amendment. Wade Townsend snored again across from me. Outside, a car drove past with music playing too loud. The motel window rattled slightly in its frame. The mistake was in the research. I left the motel before dawn, walking through Jamestown's empty streets to the internet cafe that opened at 7. The place was dingy, 4 ancient computers under flickering fluorescent lights. $2 for 30 minutes. The old machine responded slowly, each click taking 5 seconds to register. I accessed my backup email, the redundant account Corbin didn't know existed. When my cloud storage finally opened and I saw the file labeled Asset Protection Trust, I knew I had found his fatal flaw. I clicked. The PDF opened. 43 pages of legal documents filed with King County in August of last year, exactly 12 months before Corbin's fraud. My accountant had recommended it standard asset protection for retirees, shield the house from potential liability, provide some estate planning benefits, reduce probate complications. The transfer was right there on page 7. Property at Capitol Hill address conveyed from Sterling Harrington Individual to Harrington Asset Protection Trust, LLC. Effective date August 14, 2024. I was the sole trustee, the sole beneficiary. But I no longer personally owned the property. The LLC did. I created the LLC last year on my accountant's advice. Asset protection from potential lawsuits. Never imagined it would protect me from my own son. The deed of gift. Corbin had me sign in July transferred property from Sterling Harrington Individual to Corbin Harrington Individual. But Sterling Harrington Individual hadn't owned the house for 12 months. The document was transferring something I no longer possessed. It was legally worthless. Corbin had researched how to steal a house. He'd researched cognitive impairment claims and bank freezes and island abandonment strategies. He just hadn't researched whose name was actually on the deed anymore. For the first time since the empty dock, I smiled. Not from happiness, from the cold satisfaction of holding a card my opponent didn't know existed in the deck. I need to print this, I told the cafe attendant. All 43 pages, whatever it costs. He looked at the page count, calculated. $11. I paid with crumpled bills from my pocket. The printer wheezed and groaned but produced each page. I folded the stack carefully and walked back to the embassy. Claire Brennan handed me the emergency passport at 8:30 on August 20th, the booklet still warm from the printer. Dark blue cover. My photo from 3 days ago looking exactly like a man who'd spent a week being destroyed by his son. "Safe travels, Mr. Harrington," she said. "And good luck with whatever comes next." I used the remaining emergency funds for the cheapest flight to Seattle, $420, with connections through Miami. Departure at 11. 9 hours of travel time. I'd land tonight. At the airport, I bought a $40 prepaid phone to restore communications. That left me with $116 from the original $623. Enough. The flight was full. Middle seat. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. My mind was cataloging every legal move ahead, every piece of evidence I'd need, every conversation that would have to happen. The LLC paperwork was in the bag under the seat in front of me, 43 pages worth more than any weapon. Every mile toward Seattle felt like winding a spring tighter. I wasn't flying home. I was loading the mechanism that would launch everything back at the people who'd tried to bury me. "Coffee, sir," the flight attendant asked somewhere over Texas. "Black one," I said, "and keep it comin'." We landed at Seattle-Tacoma International at 8:45 in the evening. Light rain on the windows as we taxied to the gate. August in Seattle meant temperatures in the 60s, gray skies, the particular smell of wet concrete and jet fuel that meant home. I turned on the prepaid phone as I walked through the terminal. It vibrated immediately. Text message from Vernon Caldwell. "Thought you should see this. Recorded automatically 3 days before your trip. That's your truck. Let me know if you need statement." Attached was a video file. I stopped walking, stood against the terminal wall near baggage claim, and opened it. Dashcam footage. Vernon's driveway camera that recorded his street automatically. Date stamp August 12, 2025. Time 6:30 a.m. 3 days before the island trip. My truck was parked in my driveway across the street. Corbin was loading boxes into the bed. 2 other men were carrying items from my front door. Furniture. The grandfather clock that had belonged to my father. Boxes labeled in black marker. The license plate was clearly visible. The faces were clear and morning light. I zoomed in on the second man's face. Froze the video. Stared. Derek Morse. I'd fired him 5 years ago, back when I still ran the company. Caught him falsifying timesheets, charging for hours he hadn't worked, doctoring punch card records. I'd given him 2 warnings. The third time I let him go. He'd threatened to sue. Never followed through. Derek Morse. The man loading boxes in Vernon's dash cam footage was an employee I'd fired 5 years ago for falsifying timesheets. Corbin had recruited him deliberately, someone with an existing grudge who'd be loyal to the conspiracy. My son didn't just plan to take my house. He built a team. He recruited someone who already hated me, someone who'd help pack my life into boxes and ask no questions because he'd wanted to hurt me for half a decade. It was operational security through shared grudges. I stood in the airport terminal watching the video loop. Other passengers flowed around me, pulling luggage. The rain continued outside. Seattle at night, lit by streetlights and headlights, and the particular orange glow of the city I'd lived in for 40 years. Corbin had spent months building this conspiracy. The fake documents, the island abandonment, the hired grudge holder to pack my life into boxes. He'd thought of everything except the one thing that mattered. He'd researched how to steal a house but never checked who actually owned it anymore. I walked to the rental car counter, showed my emergency passport, paid with the prepaid debit card Claire had issued. A gray sedan, anonymous, exactly what I needed. Tomorrow morning I'd walk through my front door 48 hours before Corbin expected me. And I'd be ready. The spare mechanical key that had saved my life on an island 7,000 miles away now opened the door to a house my son thought he'd stolen. 11:30 at night. Rain had stopped, but the pavement was wet, reflecting streetlights. I'd sat in the rental car for 10 minutes before walking to the door. The key turned smoothly. I stepped into darkness. I didn't turn on lights. Didn't want neighbors seeing movement. I needed to see what Corbin had done first. The living room felt wrong immediately. The wall clock my father had given me was gone 30 years of ticking absent. Lighter paint showed where it had hung. I touched the spot. Dust on my fingertips. Dining room silver service set missing from the sideboard. Wedding gift, 42 years of holiday dinners. Worth $3,500. Bedroom Omega watch missing from its case. $2,800, 20th anniversary gift from my wife. Leica camera absent from the shelf, vintage model, $2,200, every major moment of Corbin's childhood photographed with it. The jewelry box on my wife's dresser sat open and empty. Her wedding ring should have been inside. Gold band, simple, worn smooth from 4 decades. She'd wanted to be buried with it. I'd kept it instead. Gone. My wife's ring. 42 years of marriage reduced to a line item on an inventory of theft. That's when the cold documentation stopped, and I had to walk outside to breathe. I stood on the back porch in darkness, rain, starting again. August in Seattle, 63 degrees. Traffic sounds 3 blocks away, someone's television, a dog barking. He didn't just rob me. He erased me piece by piece, memory by memory. After 10 minutes, I went back inside. One more room. My home office was at the back of the house. I opened the door, walked to the desk. The deed of gift sat perfectly centered on the desk blotter. Not hidden. Centered. Like a trophy. I turned on the desk lamp. The paper was crisp, professionally printed. My signature at the bottom. Notary seal. Date July 15th. The document transferring this property from me to Corbin. Gift. Voluntary. The arrogance of that placement told me everything. He thought he'd won. He thought I'd never see this. He'd left it as a message to himself, evidence no one would discover because the victim would be stranded indefinitely. I sat at the desk and opened my laptop. Created a spreadsheet. Listed every stolen item with value and significance. Wall clock, $800, irreplaceable. Silver service, $3,500. Omega watch, $2,800. Leica camera, $2,200. Wedding ring market value, $2,000, actual value infinite. Total documented theft exceeded $22,000. Grand theft, felony. I worked through the night. Dawn came around 6, gray light through rain clouds. I made coffee, drank it black. Waited until 8 o'clock. Some thefts take objects. Some take memories. The worst ones take both and leave the empty space as a monument to what you trusted. The phone number came from Marcus Brenner, a former business partner. One recommendation, Desmond Thornton. I called at 8 a.m. precisely. The phone rang twice. Thornton, a voice said. No secretary. The attorney himself. Desmond Thornton, 56, had spent 25 years specializing in property fraud and real estate disputes. And when I called at 8 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, he answered his own phone and listened to my 3-sentence summary before asking the only 2 questions that mattered. Tell me the situation in 3 sentences, he said. My son tricked me into signing a deed of gift, abandoned me in the Atlantic. Came home to find he'd stolen everything and left the deed on my desk. Silence for 3 seconds. Is the house in your name personally or through an entity? Asset Protection Trust, LLC. Created August 2024. I'm sole beneficiary and trustee. Then the deed transfers nothing. He needed LLC consent. You are the LLC. Game over. Come to my office at 10. Bring everything. He hung up. Desmond's office was downtown 20th floor, with views of Elliott Bay. He met me in the lobby, shook my hand, once led me to a conference room. I laid out the documents, the deed, the LLC paperwork, Vernon's dashcam video on my phone, the itemized theft list. Desmond reviewed everything in silence. 10 minutes, made notes on a legal pad. Finally looked up. This case is simpler than your son made it complicated, he said. The deed is legally void. You didn't have authority to transfer LLC property as an individual. Either he knew that and it's fraud, or didn't know and it's just void. Either way, you keep the house. The theft is separate criminal matter. We'll file a quiet title action to void the deed, then refer to law enforcement. How long? 3 months to trial if he contests. 2 weeks if he doesn't. He'll contest everything. Then 3 months. My retainer is $5,000. We bill at $350 per hour after that. About 15 hours total if this goes to trial. I wrote the check from the LLC business account. $5,000. Didn't hesitate. Desmond took it, made a copy, handed me a receipt. Your son researched property fraud. He just researched the wrong part. He'll be home when? 3 days, maybe 4. Good. That gives us time. First, document everything. Second, secure the property. Third, file our claim before he does. I left Desmond's office with LLC documents in hand and a strategy forming. Corbin had spent months planning the perfect crime, researching property transfers, staging the signing, recruiting Derek Morse, abandoning me 7,000 miles away. But he'd researched the wrong legal structure. The house he thought he'd stolen was protected by the one thing he never checked. And now he'd be home in 3 days to find me waiting. The locksmith's van pulled up at noon exactly, and I realized that changing the locks was the first time in 48 hours I'd felt like I was taking something back instead of discovering what had been taken. Hugh Stafford, 52, had been installing locks in Seattle for 20 years and knew to ask for documentation before changing them on property with disputed ownership. When I showed him the LLC papers, he understood immediately that I had absolute legal authority. He parked his white van in the driveway and climbed out with a toolbox that looked like it weighed 40 pounds. Clean work shirt with his company name embroidered on the pocket. Professional handshake. You called about a full property rekey, he said. Front door, back door, garage entrance. 3 sets of keys. He pulled out a tablet. I need to verify you have legal authority. If someone else is listed as owner, I can't change locks without proper documentation. I handed him the LLC paperwork. The Asset Protection Trust documents filed with King County. The property deed showing the LLC as owner. The trust agreement showing me as sole trustee and beneficiary. Hugh read carefully. 2 minutes. Scrolled through pages on his tablet verifying filing numbers against state records. Finally nodded. Understood, he said. This gives you full property management rights. Let's get started. I'm recommending commercial-grade deadbolts, pick-resistant, bump-proof. Better protection than standard residential hardware. Do it. He worked methodically. Removed the old front door lock, installed a new deadbolt. The sound of the drill was satisfying, metal on metal, something being secured. The back door took 20 minutes. Garage entrance, another 15. I tested each new lock twice. Not about security. It was about hearing something solid click into place after days of everything I'd trusted falling apart. $340, Hugh said when he finished. Includes all hardware installation and 3 complete key sets. I wrote the check from the LLC account. He handed me the keys on 3 separate rings, each tagged with location labels he'd printed. Nobody's getting in with old keys, he said. These are commercial grade. Someone would need serious equipment and time to breach them. I thanked him, watched him drive away. Stood in my own doorway holding new keys to my own house. Small victory. First of many. At 2 p.m., I drove to Seattle Police East Precinct on 12th Avenue. The building was concrete and glass functional architecture designed for processing crime efficiently. Officer Rebecca Foster, working the property crimes desk at East Precinct, started typing my theft report as routine until her calculator showed the total exceeded $25,000, and her expression shifted from sympathetic to serious. "Walk me through what's missing," she said. "I need descriptions and estimated values for each item." I pulled out my itemized list. Read it aloud. Omega Seamaster watch. Purchased 2003, valued at $2,800. Vintage Leica M3 camera, $2,200. Sterling silver service set wedding gift, $3,500. Antique wall clock, $1,500. My wife's wedding ring, 3-carat diamond, appraised at $15,000. That one I can't replace. Officer Foster's typing slowed. She looked up from her screen. $25,000. She leaned back in her chair. Total value exceeds $25,000. That's grand theft in the first degree under RCW 9A.56.200. This isn't just property crime. It's a Class B felony. Maximum 10 years, $20,000 fine. Civil courts argue about who owns what. Criminal courts don't care about ownership. They care about who took what that wasn't theirs. That's the difference between asking nicely and bringing a warrant. "I have video evidence," I said. I pulled out my phone, showed her Vernon's dash cam footage. She transferred it to the station computer, played it full screen. August 12th, 6:30 a.m. My truck in my driveway. Corbin loading boxes. 2 men helping. She paused. The video zoomed in on the license plate. Clearly visible. Zoomed on faces. Corbin identifiable. Second man carrying my father's clock. "Not, that's your truck, your belongings, and you have video evidence," Foster said. "License plate is visible. This is solid. Who's the second man?" "I'm Derek Morse. I fired him 5 years ago from my manufacturing company. Caught him falsifying timesheets. My son recruited him deliberately." Foster made notes. "Premeditation and conspiracy. Those are aggravating factors if this goes to trial." "When did you discover the theft?" "August 20th. I was out of the country. They thought I'd be gone longer." "And your son's current location?" "Las Vegas. He abandoned me on an island in the Atlantic, flew to Nevada to celebrate. He'll be back in Seattle in approximately 3 days." Foster stopped typing, looked at me fully for the first time. "Abandoned you?" "Literally. St. Helena Island. Left me at a dock with no documents, no money, no way home. I had to get emergency assistance from the U.S. Embassy." She resumed, typing faster. "That changes this from property crime to something much larger. The theft occurs in context of interstate fraud and possible endangerment. I'm flagging this for detective review." She worked in silence for 10 minutes. Made phone calls I couldn't hear, fully spoke to someone about warrant authorization. Finally turned back to me. "I'm requesting a search warrant for storage facilities based on the truck rental company's records from the video," she said. "This crosses the threshold for mandatory investigation. Duty magistrate should approve within the hour. If we recover items matching your descriptions at a storage facility your son rented, he faces felony charges regardless of how the property ownership dispute resolves. Case number," she wrote it on a card, "2025-GT-08847. Keep this. You'll need it for insurance claims and civil litigation. We'll execute the warrant within 48 hours. You'll be notified if we recover your property." I took the card. Thin paper official seal, 9 numbers that transformed this from family betrayal into state prosecution. "One more thing," Foster said. "Does your son know you're back in Seattle?" "No. He thinks I'm still stranded." "Good. Keep it that way until we execute the warrant. I don't want him moving or destroying evidence." I walked out of the police station with a case number in my pocket and a search warrant being typed as I left. Corbin thought he'd stolen my house through paperwork and abandoned me through geography. He'd planned for lawyers and civil courts. He hadn't planned for felony grand theft charges, conspiracy evidence on dashcam video, and a father who'd spent 40 years learning that you don't just fight back. You fight on every available front simultaneously. Fighting on every front meant preparing the battlefield first. My fingers moved across the keyboard, configuring the security cameras not to record, but to broadcast 47 email addresses would watch in real time when my son tried to walk into what he thought was his house. The smart home system I'd installed 2 years ago had been for peace of mind when traveling. 3 cameras, front porch, driveway, back door. They'd recorded to local storage clips I'd review if the motion sensor triggered. Tonight I changed every setting. Live broadcast mode. Stream directly to email recipients. No delay. No editing. Raw feed. I compiled the email list with the same precision I'd once used for supplier contracts. Corbin's former co-workers from Microsoft, the job he'd quit 3 years ago claiming hostile management, when really he'd been asked to leave for performance issues. LinkedIn connections, people who knew him professionally but hadn't stayed close. College friends who'd drifted away. 47 addresses total. Not intimate family friends who might give him benefit of doubt, but professional acquaintances who'd form opinions based on what they saw. Vernon appeared on my laptop screen via video call, testing the camera feeds from his house across the street. "Camera 3 covers the whole porch," he said, adjusting something on his end to confirm the angles. "Camera 1 gets his face when he looks up. You'll have everything." "And I need people to see this," I said. "Not just record it, see it happen live. No one can say I'm making it up after the fact. They'll see it, every second." I walked to the kitchen for water and noticed something I'd missed in previous nights. A wine glass in the cabinet, unwashed. I pulled it out. Dried red residue inside. The glass from August 14th, the night before our trip. Corbin had drunk wine while I'd packed. Dried saliva on the rim. I found a plastic evidence bag from the emergency kit under the sink, labeled it with date and location, sealed the glass inside, stored it in the refrigerator. DNA evidence. Backup if this went to criminal trial. If any lawyer questioned chain of custody, I had this. The wine glass from the night before our trip. His DNA on dried saliva. If this goes to criminal trial, every piece of evidence matters. Vernon logged off at 10:30. I sat alone watching the security monitor feeds 3 camera angles displayed on split screen. The porch was empty. The driveway was empty. The house was silent. I barely slept that night. Tried lying down at midnight, gave up at 2 a.m., made coffee at 5, showered, shaved, dressed carefully. Not casual clothes, I put on a suit. Navy blue-white shirt tie, business armor. When you face the person who tried to erase you, you wear something that reminds you who you are. Calculating Corbin's timeline helped pass the morning. He'd left Las Vegas yesterday, August 21st. 7-hour drive or 2-hour flight with connections. He'd want to arrive before dark to move freely. Late afternoon seemed likely. Waiting for someone who tried to kill you feels different than any business negotiation I've ever sat through. You measure time in heartbeats instead of hours. 6 p.m. passed. 6:15. 6:30. I sat in the living room with the monitor on the coffee table, volume turned up so I'd hear any sound. 6:47 p.m. Exactly a silver Honda Accord pulled into the driveway. My heart rate didn't spike. Stayed steady. 40 years of high-pressure negotiations had trained me for this. I stood, adjusted my tie, positioned myself where I could see the monitor clearly. Corbin exited the driver's side. Saskia from passenger. They looked tired. Rumpled clothes. Vegas tan already fading. Corbin carried his old house keys on a leather fob I'd given him for his 30th birthday. He approached the door, inserted the key. Metal scraped against metal. Wrong key in wrong lock. He tried again, forcing it. Third time, harder, twisting. Nothing. Confusion visible on camera 1. He stepped back, looked at the door like it had betrayed him. Tried once more. The key wouldn't even slide fully into the cylinder. Wrong cut, wrong pins. Commercial-grade deadbolt Hugh had installed, rejecting everything that wasn't on the 3 rings I now carried. The house phone rang. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Picked up. Yes, Dad. Corbin's voice sharp with confusion. Is that you? How did you? Where are you? I'm home, Corbin, inside the house. Your keys don't work anymore. Silence on the line. 3 seconds. 5. I walked to the front door and opened it. Corbin stood 3 feet away. Phone still pressed to his ear face, transitioning from confusion to shock. I looked at him. Said nothing for 2 full seconds. Surprise, son. You're right on time. I've been waiting. I pointed up at camera 1 mounted above the porch. "Now see that camera," I said. 47 people are watching this conversation right now. Live. Everything you say they hear. Everything you do they see. Want to explain to them why you left me on an island 7,000 miles away, with $23 and no way home. Corbin's eyes followed my finger to the camera. I watched his face on the monitor, better angle than standing directly in front of him. The exact moment understanding arrived. Color draining from tan skin. Mouth opening. Phone hand lowering. What did you? This isn't 7,000 miles, I said. $23, no passport, no phone. That was your plan. Want to tell your former boss at Microsoft why he's watching. So is Jennifer from your college networking group, and Thomas, who hired you in 2019. I watched his face on the monitor. That's the exact moment a man realizes he's been outplayed. Saskia grabbed Corbin's arm, pulled him back a step. She'd understood faster than he had. The trap had already closed, and everything from this point forward would be public. "We need to talk," Corbin said, voice unsteady. "Privately." "This isn't... No, there is no privately anymore," I said. "You made sure of that when you abandoned me. Now 47 people are forming opinions about who you are based on what they're watching right now. So choose your words carefully." Corbin stood frozen on my porch, staring at the camera, his old key useless in his hand, while 47 people watched him realize that everything had changed. I'd spent 7 days getting from an island dock to this doorway, and in that time I'd built a trap he never saw coming. He thought he was coming home to an empty house. Instead, he found his father a locked door and an audience watching him try to explain the unexplainable. I stepped back from the doorway and gestured them inside with the kind of courtesy you'd show strangers, because that's what they'd become the moment they left me on that island. Corbin and Saskia entered slowly, watching me like I might attack. I led them to my study at the back of the house. The cameras were still broadcasting to 47 addresses. Everything visible. Everything recorded. The deed of gift still sat on my desk where Corbin had left it, but I walked past it to the drawer. Opened it. Removed a different document. Before we discussed the house, I said, "I want to show our audience something else you prepared." I held up a single page typed dated August 10th, 2 weeks before the island. "Should I read this aloud?" I asked. For the 47 people watching, Corbin's face went pale. Saskia looked at the paper, then at him. I read, "To whom it may concern." I, Sterling Harrington, being of sound mind, have decided I can no longer continue. My son has been nothing but supportive during this difficult time. I am sorry for the pain this will cause. I looked up from the page. Statisticuko. You wrote this before the trip, I said. Before the island. You planned for me to disappear permanently, and if someone asked questions, you would produce this note explaining I was depressed and wandered off. Corbin said nothing. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. Federal Digital Notary Registration Number 4788432023. I continued. I registered my electronic signature with the Federal Notary Service in 2023. Any forensic examiner can verify in 10 minutes that this signature is forged. You did not just try to steal my house, Corbin. You tried to stage my death. There is theft and there is murder. The line between them is a fake suicide note written in your own son's handwriting. Saskia took a step away from Corbin. Small movement. Calculated. I didn't, Corbin started. Stop, I said. 47 people are watching. Choose your words very carefully. Silence filled the study. The wall clock ticked the replacement I'd bought after discovering mine stolen, each second audible. 20 minutes passed. Nobody moved. Corbin stood frozen. Saskia scrolled her phone, face unreadable. I sat at my desk, the fake suicide note still in my hand. The doorbell rang. I walked to the front door and opened it. Desmond Thornton stood on my porch with a manila folder in one hand. Evening, he said. I have a search warrant for property stolen from Sterling Harrington. Police are en route to execute it, but I thought your son might prefer to tell us where everything is rather than have detectives tearing apart storage facilities. He held up the warrant. Official seal, judge's signature. Corbin appeared behind me in the hallway. Saw Desmond. Saw the warrant. His face shifted from fear to calculation. I want a lawyer, he said. You'll need one, Desmond replied. But first, where are the items? I am not saying anything without representation. Saskia walked past all of us toward her car, parked in the driveway. She stopped beside Desmond, reached into her purse, pulled out a folded piece of paper. Marriage is trust built over years. Betrayal is trust dismantled in seconds. Watching your conspirator walk away is learning that nobody's loyalty survives when the ship starts sinking. She pressed the paper into Desmond's hand, leaned close, whispered loud enough for me to hear. Industrial District Storage Unit 347. Everything is there. I want immunity, full immunity. I will testify to all of it. The planning, the documents, the abandonment, everything. Corbin stared at her. What are you doing? Saskia kept walking toward her car. Didn't turn around. Saskia, Corbin said, voice breaking. We planned this together. You cannot. No, she said, opening her car door. You are in this. I am getting out. She drove away. Taillights disappearing down the street. Corbin stood in my driveway watching his marriage dissolve in real time while 47 people watched on live stream. Desmond looked at the paper Saskia had given him, then at me. I'll call the police, he said. Industrial District Storage Unit 347. They'll execute the warrant tonight. He left. Corbin remained in the driveway. I walked back inside and closed the door. The cameras kept rolling. My phone rang at 10:47 p.m. Officer Rebecca Foster, Seattle Police East Precinct. "Sup, Mr. Harrington," she said. We executed the warrant at Industrial District Storage. Unit 347 was rented under Derek Morse's name, but paid for with a credit card in your son's name. We found everything on your list. I sat down in the kitchen. The ring, my wife's wedding ring, found it in a cardboard box, Foster said. Someone had labeled it miscellaneous jewelry. Your son is under arrest. Grand theft first-degree conspiracy forgery based on the suicide note you provided. He is being processed downtown right now. You can collect your property from evidence within 48 hours once we finish documentation. I thanked her, hung up, sat alone in my kitchen, cried once. Briefly. The only time that night. Not from joy or relief. From the weight of knowing my wife's ring, the symbol of 42 years, had been stuffed in a box labeled miscellaneous jewelry by the son we'd raised together. I hung up the phone at 10:52 p.m. and sat in my kitchen with the knowledge that my son was in a holding cell downtown. My wife's ring was in police evidence, and the house he had tried to steal was still mine. 7 days ago, I had been abandoned on an island with $23. Tonight I had watched a conspiracy collapse from the inside and a criminal case open that would define everything that came next. But winning this battle did not mean the war was over. The war escalated 19 days after my son's arrest. Desmond's call came on September 10th at 10:30 in the morning, and I knew from his tone before he said a word that Corbin had found someone willing to fight back. "Chokavia, your son retained counsel," Desmond said without preamble. "Donald Prescott, he specializes in property disputes. 20-year track record, mostly successful. Filed counter motion this morning demanding urgent possession pending litigation." I sat down at my kitchen table. "Demanding what?" "Not possession of the house. He's arguing you're unlawfully occupying property legally gifted to Corbin through valid deed, calling you a usurper of your son's rightful home. Standard aggressive strategy when the facts are bad attack, hard demand everything, force settlement through pressure. Can he win? No. But he can make the process expensive and time-consuming. That's the goal, wear you down financially and emotionally until you agree to some compromise." I heard paper shuffling on Desmond's end. "What do you know about this Donald Prescott?" A pause. Then something I hadn't expected. Desmond laughed. Quiet, brief, like he'd remembered a private joke. "Donald is thorough," Desmond said. "Very capable attorney, strong reputation. But don't worry about him." "You smiled when you said his name." "Did I? I can hear it in your voice." "Professional respect, I suppose," Desmond said. "Let me handle Donald. You focus on staying in your house." He hung up before I could ask more questions. 19 days ago, I had been in a holding pattern between victory and waiting. Now the war was officially declared, my son had hired an army, and I had to trust mine was better. Donald Prescott, 51, had built a reputation over 20 years defending property disputes, and was exactly the kind of aggressive, competent attorney Corbin needed. What my son didn't know was that Donald had history with Desmond Thornton. The next day, September 11th, I received a call from Detective Raymond Hayes, asking if I could come to the station. Not urgent, not an emergency. Just questions about the ongoing investigation. I arrived at 2 p.m. Hayes met me in the lobby, shook my hand, led me to a conference room on the 3rd floor. Professional, efficient. The kind of detective who'd seen enough fraud to know what mattered and what didn't. "We've been interviewing Ms. Harrington," Hayes said. "Saskia. She retained Julia Mercer as counsel and negotiated full immunity in exchange for testimony. I wanted you to hear what she's telling us." He pulled out a folder, typed pages, dates, timeline. "Planning started January 2025, Hayes said. 6 months before your trip. Corbin told Saskia they needed to act before you changed your will or moved the house into a structure they couldn't touch. They rented the warehouse unit in March. Contacted 3 real estate agents April through May for property valuations, told them Corbin was considering refinancing options. The agents provided estimated values averaging $845,000. He slid papers across the table. Email printouts. Realtor letterhead. Professional assessments of my house's worth. Oh, she's providing everything, Hayes continued. Bank records showing warehouse rental payments, emails with the real estate agents, the online booking confirmation for the island guide they hired in July. Every piece of this conspiracy documented and organized. Saskia was giving them the blueprint to a conspiracy, the way an architect hands over building plans, every measurement, every material, every decision point documented and dated. Why is she cooperating? I asked. Yeah, because Julia Mercer is smart, Hayes said. She knows Saskia's only path to avoiding prison is throwing Corbin to the wolves. Full immunity, complete testimony, no prosecution. Saskia walks away. Your son doesn't. Detective Raymond Hayes, assigned to the Economic Crimes Unit, had handled enough conspiracy cases to recognize when testimony crossed from property crime into something that could destroy lives. Hayes turned to the next page in his folder. Now the suicide note, he said. That's what concerns me most. What did Saskia say about that? He read from the transcript. Corbin said it was insurance. If his father figured things out, the note would make him look confused, unreliable. Psychological leverage. Hayes looked up from the page. Squiumps. When I asked her what she thought the note would be used for, she hesitated. Started crying. Said Corbin told her it was just to scare you if you found out. Make you seem unstable if you reported anything. She claims she didn't know it would be used as cover for permanent disappearance. Julia Mercer, Saskia's defense attorney, had negotiated the immunity deal knowing her client's testimony would be devastating, but that was the only way to keep Saskia out of prison. Hayes closed the folder. Ms. Harrington broke down during questioning. Said she thought they were taking the house, not planning for you to never come back. I stopped recording, consulted with the prosecutor. We both agree this case just escalated. Escalated how? From grand theft to conspiracy with potential homicide staging elements. The fake suicide note, the island abandonment, the complete theft of your identification. Corbin created conditions for you to disappear permanently with documentation that would close investigation quickly. Whether he intended to let nature kill you or planned something more active, the structure is there. Conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted murder through abandonment, staging false evidence of suicide. The prosecutor is considering additional charges. I sat in silence, processing what that meant. My son hadn't just stolen from me. He'd built a framework for my death. What happens now? I asked. Saskia testifies. Donald Prescott tries to fight the property case. Meanwhile, we build a criminal case that goes far beyond theft. Your son is facing potentially decades if this goes to trial and loses. I left the police station at 4 p.m. with copies of Saskia's testimony in a manila envelope. Drove to Desmond's office. Sat across from him while he read through the 9 pages of dates, names, emails, and the slow construction of a plan that had crossed from theft into something darker. The fake suicide note wasn't just fraud anymore, Desmond said quietly. It's evidence of intent to stage your permanent disappearance. Saskia's immunity deal just handed prosecutors a potential conspiracy to commit murder case. He set the papers down. Tita and Donald Prescott is going to walk into this trial not knowing his client is facing charges that could put him away for life. I waited for him to explain the smile, the laugh, the professional respect comment. He didn't. I sat in Desmond's office reviewing Saskia's typed testimony, 9 pages that transformed property theft into potential homicide staging. Corbin had hired Donald Prescott to fight the property battle, but Saskia's immunity deal had just handed prosecutors a case that could end with my son in prison for decades. Desmond's smile when hearing Donald's name would have to wait. What he showed me the next day mattered more. Desmond placed the iPad on the polished conference table between us, like it was evidence at trial. The silver device looked ordinary, almost harmless, but the attorney's expression told me what it contained would change everything. He tapped the screen once. The Google search history appeared, and I recognized Corbin's iCloud account immediately. My son had been stupid enough to document his intentions. "This is the living room iPad you purchased 2 years ago," Desmond said. Corbin used it regularly, logged into his personal iCloud account. These searches are all time-stamped and verified through Google's records. Monica Caldwell. Desmond's legal assistant sat at the end of the table, photographing each screen Desmond displayed. Click. Documentation. Evidence chain. January 18th, Desmond said, scrolling to the first entry. Query reads, "How to convince elderly parent sign property transfer." The words glowed on the screen. Preserved. Undeniable. February 9th, Desmond continued. Query, how long before missing person declared dead? Monica's camera clicked right on cue, capturing the metadata. There are 47 searches total, Desmond said, all captured between January 10th and February 14th. Every one of them related to inheritance property transfer abandonment or the legal consequences of leaving someone stranded. The software logged everything, including timestamps, exact query text, and the websites visited afterward. He deleted the browser history before the trip, I said. I watched him do it the night before we left. He sat at the kitchen table with the iPad clearing everything. He thought he was covering his tracks. The software logs everything, Desmond said. Deletion doesn't matter. We have timestamps, exact search terms, even the websites he visited afterward. Corbin researched survival rates on tropical islands, read articles about missing persons investigations, studied inheritance law in Washington state. All of it captured, all of it admissible, all of it proving premeditation. Monica arranged the printed screenshots in chronological order across the conference table. The progression told a story more clearly than any testimony could. Curiosity in January, planning in early February, urgency in the week before departure. Corbin's digital footprints mapped his descent from greed to attempted murder. Each timestamp was another nail in his defense. This evidence supports conspiracy to commit murder charges, Desmond said. The prosecution can argue that your son researched methods to kill you through abandonment, understood the legal consequences, and proceeded anyway. The fake suicide note combined with these searches creates a narrative of intent to stage your death. He closed the iPad cover, set it down gently. The software also captured location data. He continued. GPS coordinates showing everywhere the iPad traveled. Multiple meetings between Corbin and Saskia at locations outside your house, restaurants, parking lots, storage facilities. Dates and times all documented. This wasn't just your son acting alone. This was coordination. The afternoon light through the conference room windows had shifted from bright to golden. We'd been here 2 hours. My coffee had gone cold. You installed monitoring software on your own property to protect yourself, Desmond said. Your son used that same property to plan your murder. The iPad you bought him for convenience became the device that recorded his conspiracy. That's not just evidence. That's poetic justice. Desmond closed the iPad and looked at me with something like respect. Then he said the words that made my blood freeze. The tracking software did not just record searches and deleted history. It captured every photo taken on the device, including the ones Corbin shot on the island after he abandoned you. I was not ready to see those images, but he was already reaching for the folder. The photos would have to wait. Desmond had other evidence to present first. Desmond spread 3 photocopied $100 bills across Felix Garrison's desk, serial numbers circled in red ink. Felix Garrison was a notary in Ballard who had stamped thousands of documents in 30 years and never once questioned the authenticity of a signature until Desmond Thornton walked into his office with photocopied $100 bills. We'd arrived at 9 a.m. on September 13th. Felix's office was above a coffee shop, one room with a desk, filing cabinets, and a window overlooking the street. He looked at us with the wariness of a man who knew something had gone wrong but didn't know how badly. Mr. Garrison, Desmond said, sitting without being invited. We need to discuss the notarization you performed on February 14th at a Starbucks in Capitol Hill. Felix's face went pale. I don't recall. You notarized a deed of gift. Sterling Harrington transferring property to Corbin Harrington. You were paid $300 in cash. Yes, that sounds right. Desmond tapped the photocopies. These are copies from Sterling's personal cash withdrawal ledger dated January 30th. Can you read those serial numbers aloud for us? Felix looked at the papers. His hand shook slightly as he picked up the first one. JL 44738892B. And the second, JL 44738893B. Sequential bills, Desmond said. Withdrawn from Sterling's bank account 6 weeks before your notarization. How much were you paid for the Starbucks signing? $300. Your normal fee, $25. Desmond let that sit for a moment. 12 times your normal rate. Why? Felix swallowed. The client said it was urgent. Convenience fee for meeting at his location. Did the client mention any health issues with his father? Mobility problems? Cognitive issues? He said his father couldn't come to my office. Medical issues. Didn't specify. I spoke for the first time. I had no medical issues. I didn't know about the signing until weeks later. My son lied to you, paid you 12 times your normal fee with cash he stole from me, and you notarized a fraudulent signature. Felix looked at me, then at Desmond, then at the photocopied bills. This is the money, he said quietly. I kept 2 of the bills, sequential hundreds. They're in my desk right now. He had stolen my house using my own money to buy the signature. Desmond stood. The police will want to talk to you about this. I suggest you get an attorney. Notarizing fraudulent documents is a crime. Accepting bribes compounds it, especially when the money used for the bribe was stolen from the victim. We left Felix sitting at his desk, staring at the photocopied bills. 2 days later, September 15th. I sat on Vernon's back porch drinking cold beer and watching the sun set over Puget Sound. The water reflected orange and purple. September in Seattle meant temperatures dropping, leaves starting to turn, the particular smell of autumn arriving early. Vernon had called that morning asking me to come by. Said he'd heard something I needed to know. He handed me a beer, sat in the chair next to mine, said nothing for 5 minutes. Finally, Saskia sent word through her attorney. Corbin wants to make an offer. What kind of offer? Settlement. You sign a quitclaim deed returning the house to him. He pays you $200,000 cash. All criminal charges dropped him, Saskia, Derek Morse, Felix, the notary. Everyone walks away. I sat on Vernon's porch and watched the September sunset turn the Puget Sound orange, thinking about the price of justice versus the cost of surrender. That is ransom, I said. He wants me to pay him to stop prosecuting the crimes he committed. $200,000, Vernon said. Cash. No trial, no legal fees, no risk of losing. And he keeps the house. No. You get the house back clean. He signs over the fraudulent deed, acknowledges it was invalid, returns full ownership to you. The $200,000 is his penalty payment for the trouble. I drank my beer. It was cold and bitter. Exactly what I needed. What is the trial going to cost? Vernon asked. But Desmond estimates $100,000 to $150,000 if it goes to verdict. More if there are appeals. And if you lose, I get nothing. Pay all the legal fees. Corbin potentially walks on criminal charges if the civil case creates complications. The offer is $200,000, Vernon said. More than the legal fees. Clean resolution. You get your house, you get paid, everyone moves on. Everyone moves on, I repeated. Except Corbin doesn't face consequences for abandoning me on an island, for stealing my wife's wedding ring, for forging a suicide note with my name on it. Vernon drank his beer. The offer expires in 72 hours. Saskia's attorney was clear about that. We sat in silence. The sun dropped below the horizon. Lights started appearing across the sound. And you know this will cost a fortune, Vernon finally said. Trial. Appeals if he loses and fights it. You might lose everything. I know. $200,000 is real money. More than most people see in a lifetime. You could take it, keep your house, move on with your life. I know. The settlement offer was a lifeboat with a hole in it. It would keep me afloat just long enough to drown in regret. But I am not letting him walk away from forgery that was supposed to end my life, I said. He researched how long I would survive without food and water. He wrote a fake suicide note with my signature. He paid a notary with my own money to help him steal my house. Then he flew to Las Vegas to celebrate while I was supposed to die on an island. I finished my beer, set the empty bottle on the porch railing. $200,000 is not enough to make me forget what he did. Not enough to make me sleep at night knowing he faced no real consequences. Not enough to compensate for my wife's wedding ring being labeled miscellaneous jewelry in a storage unit. Vernon nodded slowly. Then we go to trial. We will go to trial. We sat in silence. He got 2 more beers from inside. We drank them without speaking. Sometimes friendship is knowing when words are unnecessary. Vernon set down his empty beer bottle and pulled out his phone. He scrolled for a moment, then turned the screen toward me. It was a text from an unknown number sent 20 minutes ago while we had been talking. 4 words that changed everything. Donald Prescott wants a meeting. The immunity text turned out to be a wrong number, someone looking for a different case entirely. Vernon confirmed it the next morning. But the psych evaluation Donald's team had requested was very real. Dr. Foster slid a blank sheet of paper across her desk and asked me to draw a clock showing 3:15. Dr. Rachel Foster was a neuropsychologist who had assessed competency in 400 cases and had never seen someone pass memory tests while looking quite so tired. Her office was downtown 20th floor windows overlooking Elliott Bay. September 18th, 9:30 in the morning. I'd slept maybe 3 hours the night before. Donald Prescott's legal team requested this evaluation. Dr. Foster said, watching me draw, "They're arguing you were cognitively impaired when you signed the deed, that you didn't understand what you were signing." I drew a circle, added numbers 1 through 12, drew hands pointing to 3 and 3, slid the paper back. She glanced at it, made a note. "I'm going to read 10 words. In 5 minutes, I will ask you to repeat them back in order." She read slowly: clock, lamp, river, 15, hammer, daughter, August, passport, hospital, Sterling. We spent the next 5 minutes discussing other things. My business history. When I'd sold the company. What I did in retirement. How I'd decided to create the Asset Protection Trust, LLC. "Tell me about that decision," she said. "The LLC. Why did you create it?" "My accountant recommended it in 2024. Standard asset protection for retirees. Shield the house from liability, simplify estate planning, provide some tax advantages. I met with him twice, reviewed the documents, filed the paperwork with King County." "And you understood what you were doing?" "Well, completely. I'd run a business for 40 years. LLCs and trusts were tools I'd used dozens of times." She made notes. "Now repeat the 10 words I read earlier." Clock Lamp River 15 Hammer Daughter August Passport Hospital Sterling. You want the company sale details from 2022, also sold to Cascade Industrial for $12.3 million. Closed November 14th. Used Morgan Stanley as intermediary. Took 8 months to negotiate. Dr. Foster set down her pen. Your cognitive function is completely intact. Memory excellent. Decision-making capacity clear. I will submit my report stating you had full decision-making capacity when you signed that deed. Donald Prescott's strategy just collapsed. I left her office at 11:30 feeling vindicated, but exhausted. The evaluation had been 2 hours of memory tests, timeline reconstruction, and proving I understood complex financial decisions. All to confirm what I already knew. I wasn't confused when I signed. I was betrayed. 4 days later, September 22nd, I stood in the King County Courthouse hallway waiting for a procedural hearing when I saw a face I recognized. Wade Townsend owned the Island Motel where I'd made my emergency call, and he had flown to Seattle to make sure the man who owed him $1,800 did not get away with stealing a house. It's Mr. Harrington. Wade said, approaching with an attorney I didn't know. I'm filing creditor intervention. If Corbin Harrington owns that house, I got legal interest in it. He owes me $1,800. Desmond appeared beside me reading the filing Wade's attorney handed him. Creditor Lion, Desmond said, smiling slightly. Mr. Townsend flew from St. Helena to establish his interest in any property your son claims to own. This creates a cloud on title. One more reason the deed is worthless, even if it were valid. Wade Townsend had flown 2,000 miles to collect $1,800 from a man who tried to inherit a house by murdering his father. The mathematics of justice never balanced the way you expected. He stayed at my motel 3 nights, Wade said. Ran up $1,800 in charges, left without paying, said he'd wire the money. Never did. I tracked his wife's credit card to that resort, but by the time I got there, they were gone. Now I hear he's claiming to own an $800,000 house. So I'm filing my claim. Trockum. The court will note your lien, Desmond said. Even if Corbin somehow won the property dispute, which he won't, your claim would attach to the title. He couldn't sell, couldn't refinance, couldn't do anything without satisfying your debt first. Wade nodded, satisfied. $1,800 plus interest, plus legal fees. He wants a house, he pays his debts first. The island was still exacting its price, reaching across 2,000 miles to complicate my son's theft. That night, September 24th, I sat alone in the bedroom at Vernon's house. My own house was still technically mine, but I'd been staying with Vernon during the legal proceedings. Easier, less haunted. I held my wife's photo. 8 by 10 framed the picture from our 30th anniversary. Her smile, her eyes, the way she'd looked at me like I was the only person in the room. In my other hand, her wedding ring. Recovered from police evidence 3 days ago. Gold band worn smooth from 42 years. The weight of it familiar. He is not our son the way we thought, I said to the photo. Maybe he never was, but I raised him. That counts for something. It has to. Silence. Just me and a photograph and a ring. I pulled out paper and pen. Wrote, Dear Corbin, the letter took 30 minutes. Not legal language, not evidence, just father to son. Questions I would never ask out loud. Observations about where things had gone wrong. Memories of teaching him to tie his shoes, to ride a bicycle, to drive a car. Wondering at what point he'd decided I was worth more dead than alive. How do you prosecute someone you once taught to ride a bicycle? I read the letter twice. Folded it carefully. Didn't seal it. Didn't address an envelope. Set it on the nightstand. Stared at it for 10 minutes. Tomorrow I destroy his life in court, I said to the photo. Tonight I am just a father sitting alone with your wedding ring. I picked up the letter, opened the nightstand drawer, put it inside, closed the drawer. Didn't send it, didn't tear it up, just kept it. Evidence of something I couldn't name. Proof that underneath the legal battle and the evidence and the strategy, I was still a father who had raised a son and watched him become a stranger. My phone buzzed, past midnight. Desmond's name on the screen. I opened the message. 4 words, no punctuation, all urgency. Trial date is set. The courtroom smelled like furniture polish and fear. I sat at the plaintiff's table in King County Superior Court Department 15, watching Corbin adjust his tie 3 seats away. He wouldn't look at me. Hadn't looked at me since we entered 40 minutes ago when the bailiff called our case number and everyone stood for Judge Whitfield's entrance. Judge Helena Whitfield had presided over property disputes for 18 years and could spot an unprepared attorney within the first 5 minutes. She was 58, with steel gray hair pulled into a bun that suggested she had no patience for theatrics. She reviewed the case file with the efficiency of someone who'd read it twice, already making notes in the margins, with a fountain pen that looked older than my lawsuit. She gestured to Donald Prescott without looking up. Defense may present opening statement. Donald buttoned his jacket and approached the jury box. His opening was everything Desmond had warned me it would be: compelling, sympathetic, perfectly calibrated, to make Corbin seem like a desperate son trying to protect family assets from his father's declining judgment. Sterling Harrington signed a deed of gift on July 15th. Donald said, holding up the document like it was scripture. His signature, his initials on every page, witnessed by a licensed notary who will testify that Mr. Harrington appeared competent and willing. He transferred his home to his son of his own free will, and now 6 months later claims fraud because he regrets that decision. He painted me as confused, possibly incompetent, certainly ungrateful. He described Corbin's years of supporting me financially, wildly exaggerated numbers that transformed $47,000 in gambling debt into charitable contributions to a father who couldn't manage his own affairs. He mentioned my age 4 times, my isolation, my dependence on Corbin for basic decision-making. He never mentioned Saskia, never mentioned the island, never mentioned the iPad search history or the warehouse full of stolen furniture or the fake suicide note found in Corbin's glove compartment. And he never mentioned the LLC. Desmond had predicted this 2 weeks ago, sitting in his office while rain hammered the windows. He'll focus entirely on the deed because it's his only defense. The moment he acknowledges the LLC timeline, his case collapses. He'll pretend it doesn't exist and hope the jury doesn't understand corporate property law. When Donald sat down, Judge Whitfield nodded to Desmond. Plaintiff, Desmond didn't approach the jury. He stayed at our table, one hand resting on a single manila folder. To Your Honor, the defense just spent 12 minutes describing a property transfer that is legally impossible. He opened the folder with the careful precision of someone revealing a trap. The house at 4725 Cascade Ridge Drive was transferred into Harrington Family Asset Trust, LLC, on February 14, 2024. 16 months before the alleged deed signing. Sterling Harrington, as an individual, cannot gift property he does not individually own. He placed the LLC formation documents on the clerk's desk. The defense's entire argument rests on a deed that attempts to transfer property the grantor did not possess. Under Washington law, that deed is void ab initio, void from the beginning. It has no legal effect whatsoever. Judge Whitfield took the documents, reviewed them for 30 seconds that felt like 30 minutes, then looked at Donald. Counsel, does your client dispute the LLC formation date? Donald stood slowly. The confidence that had carried him through his opening statement had evaporated. Your Honor, the LLC was formed for legitimate asset protection purposes, but does your client dispute that the property was titled in the LLC on July 15th, when this deed was allegedly signed? No, Your Honor, but the intent. Then how does Mr. Harrington transfer property he doesn't own? Donald opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Corbin, who was staring at the table with the intensity of someone trying to disappear. Your Honor, we need a recess to review the LLC documentation and prepare a proper response. We just started counsel. You had 6 weeks to review plaintiff's filings. The LLC transfer is listed on page 4 of the complaint. Silence. I counted it later when I couldn't sleep. 4 seconds. Long enough for the court reporter to look up from her stenograph. Long enough for the bailiff to shift his weight. Long enough for 2 jurors to glance at each other. Long enough for me to see everything Donald Prescott wasn't saying. He'd built his entire case on the deed. Only the deed. He'd assumed we'd fight about competency, about whether I understood what I was signing, about whether Corbin had used undue influence. He'd prepared for a fraud trial with psychiatric experts and character witnesses. He hadn't prepared for a title dispute. Judge Whitfield closed the LLC filing folder and looked at Donald with something between pity and impatience. I'm going to hear the fraud evidence, but I want the record to reflect that the defense has offered no legal theory for how a deed can transfer LLC-owned property. She turned to Desmond. Counsel Thornton, I assume you have witnesses prepared. Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff will testify about the defendant's fraudulent conduct, including abandoning him on a foreign island with $23. Andy Alzaint. We'll also present testimony from the notary, who accepted $300 in cash, 12 times his normal rate, to notarize a fraudulent deed. Corbin flinched at Saskia's name, the first emotion I'd seen from him all morning. Judge Whitfield made a note. Then she said the words that changed everything. I am inclined to grant summary judgment on the title issue alone, but I want to hear the fraud evidence first. Counsel Thornton, call your first witness. Felix Garrison raised his right hand and swore to tell the truth about the $300 he had accepted in a Starbucks parking lot. Desmond had called him immediately after the judge's ruling on the LLC issue. Felix walked to the witness stand like a man heading to his own sentencing hearing. He was 41, balding, wearing a suit that looked like it had been purchased specifically for this testimony. His notary license dangled from a lanyard around his neck, a detail that felt almost defiant. Mr. Garrison, Desmond began, on July 15th of last year, did you notarize a document titled Deed of Gift at a Starbucks location in Kirkland? Yes. What did the defendant pay you for that service? Felix glanced at Corbin, then back at Desmond. $300 cash. How much do you normally charge for mobile notary services? $25. Desmond let that number settle over the courtroom. 12 times the normal rate. Did the defendant explain why he was willing to pay 12 times your usual fee? He said his father had mobility issues and could not come to my office. He said it was urgent. Did Sterling Harrington appear to have mobility issues when you met him? No. He walked from the car to the table without assistance. He carried his own coffee. Desmond approached the witness stand with a folder. Mr. Garrison, I'm showing you what's been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 18. Do you recognize these serial numbers? Felix studied the document. His face went pale. Yes. Where did you see them? On the $300 bills the defendant gave me. Desmond turned to face the jury. These are photocopies of Sterling Harrington's cash withdrawal ledger from January 30th, 2025. The serial numbers match exactly the bills you received. The defendant used the plaintiff's own money to bribe you. The courtroom went silent. I watched Corbin's attorney write something on his legal pad, then cross it out. Judge Whitfield leaned forward. Let me understand this correctly. The defendant withdrew cash from his father's account, then used that cash to pay an inflated fee to a notary, all to facilitate stealing his father's house. That is correct, Your Honor," Desmond said. The judge looked at Corbin with an expression I had never seen on a judicial face before. Not anger, but something closer to disgust. "You stole your father's cash to pay someone to help you steal your father's house." Donald stood. "Your Honor, we dispute the characterization." Sit down, counsel. The serial numbers don't lie." Desmond let Felix step down, then reached into his briefcase for one more folder. I knew what was coming. We had discussed it 3 times, debated whether to use it, whether it was necessary. In the end, Desmond had convinced me it changes the criminal classification. It matters. "Your Honor, I have one final piece of evidence to present before resting." Judge Whitfield nodded. "Proceed." "This is an adoption decree filed in King County Superior Court, November 1989. Desmond held up the document. Corbin Harrington, age 3, birth name, sealed adopted by Sterling Harrington and Margaret Harrington. I had never told Corbin he was adopted because it never mattered. He was my son fully and completely from the day we brought him home at age 3 until the day he left me to die on an island. Margaret and I had decided we would tell him when he turned 18, but she died when he was 16. And after her funeral, I could not find the words. Then years passed, and it became something we simply did not discuss. I had kept the adoption papers in a safe deposit box at the bank, along with Margaret's wedding ring and the deed to our first house. Documents that marked the most important moments of my life. Now that document sat on the clerk's desk under fluorescent lights marked as evidence. It under Washington Revised Code 74.34. Desmond continued. Abandonment and financial exploitation of an adoptive parent who raised the defendant constitutes aggravated elder abuse. Enhanced criminal penalties apply. Corbin's face drained of color. He turned to Donald, who was flipping through a statute book with the frantic energy of someone looking for a life raft. Judge Whitfield read the adoption decree in silence. When she looked up, her expression had changed from disgust to something I could not quite name. The defendant was aware he was adopted. "We believe so, Your Honor," Desmond said. "But it does not matter for purposes of the statute. The relationship is legal and binding regardless of the defendant's knowledge." Corbin looked at me then. First time since the trial began that he actually looked at me, not past me or through me, but directly at me. I looked back. There was nothing to say. No words that would cross the distance between us. Everything that mattered now existed only in legal documents and court records and evidence tags. The relationship between us had been reduced to exhibit numbers. What do you say to someone who was once your child, when all that remains between you is a case number and a judge's ruling? I had raised him from age 3. Fed him, taught him to ride a bicycle, sat through school plays and soccer games and college graduations. Helped him move into his first apartment. Lent him money when his business failed. Loved him the way you love a son, completely, without reservation, without keeping score. He had repaid that by trying to kill me for a house. Judge Whitfield broke the silence. "I am calling a 15-minute recess. When we return, Counsel Prescott, I expect you to explain how you intend to proceed, given what we have heard today." The courtroom emptied. I stayed in my seat, watching Corbin and Donald huddle in urgent conversation by the defense table. Corbin's hands moved in sharp gestures. Donald kept shaking his head. When the judge returned, Donald stood immediately. He spoke 3 words I had not expected to hear. "We request continuance." But Desmond was already standing, and his response stopped everyone cold. Plaintiff opposes and moves for summary judgment on all counts. Desmond set his coffee down and said the words that made everything about Donald make sense. He missed the deadline on purpose. We were back in his office the morning after the summary judgment motion. Rain streaked the windows. I had slept 4 hours and woken up expecting to prepare for an appeal hearing that would never happen. "Explain," I said. Desmond leaned back in his chair. Donald Prescott graduated top of my class at University of Washington Law in 2003. I taught him civil procedure. In 22 years of practice, he has never missed a filing deadline. Not once. His record is flawless. I thought about Donald's face when the judge asked about the LLC. The way he had fumbled through his response like someone reading lines he did not believe. "You knew he would do this. That is why you smiled when you heard his name." "I suspected," Desmond said. Donald's mother died in 2019. Nursing home neglect. Her financial advisor had stolen $40,000 from her accounts over 3 years. Donald tried to prosecute, but the statute of limitations had expired. He blamed himself for not checking on her more carefully. The pieces assembled themselves in my mind. Corbin hired the best attorney money could buy to destroy him from the inside. "Donald is a fierce advocate, but he can only work with what he's given," Desmond said. Corbin was so arrogant that he lied to his own attorney. He hid the existence of the LLC from Donald, thinking we wouldn't look into the county registry. Donald built his entire defense on the deed because his client sabotaged him. When our LLC paperwork hit the record, Donald was completely blindsided. He didn't miss the deadline on purpose, he simply ran out of time trying to fix a hopeless, fraudulent case. I felt something I had not expected to feel, a kind of respect for Donald Prescott. "How much did Corbin pay him?" $50,000 up front. Another 50 if he won. Corbin does not have that kind of money. Saskia did. Inheritance from her grandmother. She thought she was buying the best defense available. Desmond smiled, thin and satisfied. Instead, she bought a prosecutor in a defense attorney's suit. 2 days later, Judge Whitfield delivered her verdict. The courtroom was half empty. Most of the spectators had lost interest once the dramatic testimony ended. Only the principals remained, Desmond and me at the plaintiff's table, Corbin and Donald at the defense table, a court reporter, and a bailiff who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. Justice in a courtroom is not the lightning strike you imagine. It is paperwork read aloud in monotone, a gavel tap, and the quiet shuffling of people who suddenly have nowhere else they need to be. "The deed of gift, dated July 15th, is void," Judge Whitfield said, reading from her prepared statement. "The property at 4725 Cascade Ridge Drive was held in Harrington Family Asset Trust, LLC at the time of the alleged transfer. Sterling Harrington, as an individual, cannot transfer property he does not individually own. The defendant had no valid claim to ownership at any time." She turned a page. "Even if the deed were valid, which it is not, the evidence presented establishes fraud by misrepresentation, organized theft, and conspiracy. The plaintiff was abandoned on foreign soil with insufficient funds. The defendant used the plaintiff's own money to bribe a notary. The defendant attempted to stage the plaintiff's suicide. These actions constitute clear and convincing evidence of fraudulent conduct." Corbin did not look up when she said that. He just sat there, smaller than I remembered. The man who had left me on an island looked diminished somehow, as if the verdict had physically reduced him. "I am referring 4 criminal charges to the King County Prosecutor's Office," Judge Whitfield continued. "Grand theft in the first degree, organized fraud, forgery, and aggravated elder abuse under Washington Revised Code 74.34. The prosecutor will determine whether to file charges within 30 days. She closed the file. "Title to the property remains with Sterling Harrington as trustee of the LLC. The defendant is ordered to surrender any keys, access codes, or documents related to the property within 72 hours. Court is adjourned." The gavel fell. One sharp crack that echoed in the nearly empty room. I stood. Desmond shook my hand. Corbin remained seated while Donald gathered papers into his briefcase with the careful movements of someone who had accomplished exactly what he intended. I drove home alone. Seattle rain started as I crossed the bridge light, at first, then steady, wipers running in their rhythmic back and forth. The radio played something instrumental that I did not recognize. Traffic moved at the pace of people who had nowhere urgent to be on a Friday afternoon. I felt nothing. Not triumph, not grief, not vindication. Just exhaustion. The rain was November cold, the kind that soaks through jacket sleeves and reminds you winter is coming whether you are ready or not. I turned the heater up. The car smelled like coffee from the cup holder and something faintly medicinal from the air freshener Desmond had given me weeks ago. For the first time since August 15th on that island waiting 3 days for a son who never came back, I was finally allowed to feel nothing. No need to strategize. No need to anticipate Corbin's next move. No need to protect myself from someone who should have protected me. The legal battle was over. The house was mine. My son was facing prison. Everything had been resolved exactly as it should be, and I felt nothing. Maybe that was the real victory, not the judge's ruling, or the criminal referrals, or the property title, but permission to stop fighting. To let exhaustion win. To sit in Seattle rain and drive home and feel absolutely nothing except tired. I parked in Vernon's driveway and sat in silence for 3 minutes before getting out. The rain drummed on the roof. The engine ticked as it cooled. My hands rested on the steering wheel in the 10-2 position I had learned 45 years ago in driver's education. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Probably a spam call about my car's extended warranty or a credit card I did not have. But I looked anyway. The message had no greeting. Just 6 words that made my chest tighten. Corbin wants to speak with you. I deleted Corbin's message without reading it twice. The first read was enough. 6 words that wanted something from me I no longer had to give. I sat in Vernon's guest room with the phone in my hand, rain still falling outside, and considered what responding would accomplish. Nothing. It would accomplish nothing. What could he possibly say that would matter, now apology, too late, and too inadequate? Explanation. I had spent 3 months assembling explanations from bank records and witness testimony and surveillance footage. Reconciliation, the adoption papers sitting in evidence storage, made that word meaningless. What could I say back? That I forgave him, I did not. That I understood, I never would. That some part of me still loved him. Maybe that was true, but love does not mean allowing someone back into your life to hurt you again. I deleted the message, blocked the number, set the phone face down on the nightstand. Silence was the only honest response left. A knock on the door interrupted the quiet. Vernon's voice came through. "You okay in there?" "I am fine," I said. "Just tired. Going to sleep early." "You need anything food? I got leftover pasta." "No, thank you." Footsteps retreated down the hallway. Vernon had been good about giving me space since the trial ended. He understood that some kinds of tired cannot be fixed with food or conversation. I sat on the edge of the bed in the small guest room that had been my home for 2 months. The walls were beige. The furniture was IKEA assembled with slightly crooked shelves. A framed print of the Seattle skyline hung above the dresser. It was nobody's idea of permanent, but it had been safe when I needed safety. I opened the top drawer and took out the letter. I had written it on September 24th, 3 weeks before the trial. 8 pages in my handwriting on lined notebook paper. Words I had needed to say but could not say to Corbin's face. Things about raising him and loving him and where everything had gone wrong. I unfolded it carefully. The creases were worn soft from the times I had opened and reread it late at night when sleep would not come. The first page started, "I raised you from age 3. I taught you to tie shoes, to ride a bike, to drive a car. Where did I go wrong? I read that line and felt the distance between September and November. The man who had written that question had still believed there might be an answer. He had still thought understanding the betrayal would somehow make it hurt less. I kept reading. Page 2 talked about memories teaching him fractions at the kitchen table, camping trips to Mount Rainier the day he graduated college, and I had been so proud I cried in the parking lot afterward. Page 5 had the line, "Your mother would have known what to say to you, I never did." Maybe that was the problem all along. I paused there. Margaret had always been better with words, better at navigating the emotional terrain of parenting. I had provided structure and stability and money for college. She had provided the conversations that mattered. How do you grieve someone who is still alive, but no longer yours to love? That was the question the letter had tried to answer. 8 pages circling around the impossibility of mourning a relationship that had not technically ended, but had been irrevocably destroyed. Corbin was alive. Corbin would go to prison, but he would eventually get out. He existed in the world, but the son I had raised no longer existed anywhere except in my memory of him. I read to the end of the letter. The final page was short. Just 3 lines. I do not know if I can forgive you. I do not know if I should. But I need you to know I tried to be a good father. These words belong to the father I was in September. That man no longer exists. The trial had answered questions the letter could not. The legal system had provided what emotional processing never would: finality. Corbin had done these things. The evidence was documented. The judge had ruled. 4 criminal charges waited for prosecution. The letter no longer matters. What needed saying was said in courtroom testimony and legal filings. I folded the pages once, then tore them in half. Not from anger, not even from pain anymore. Just from the understanding that some chapters close whether you write a proper ending or not. I tore the halves into quarters, then into smaller pieces, and dropped them in the wastebasket beside the dresser. They fell with barely any sound. On the dresser sat a framed photo of Margaret, 5x7, taken on our 20th anniversary. She was smiling at something outside the frame, probably something I had said. I picked it up and held it for a moment. I did what I had to do, I said to the photo. I hope you understand. She would have. Margaret had been practical about consequences. She would have testified at the trial if she were alive. She would have presented evidence and cross-examined witnesses and demanded accountability. But she also would have grieved. She would have let herself feel the loss instead of pressing forward through exhaustion and legal strategy. Maybe that was the difference between us. She knew how to mourn. I set the photo back on the dresser and turned off the light. The room fell into darkness, broken only by streetlight coming through the window. Rain still fell softer now, steady and rhythmic against the glass. I lay down. The pillow smelled like Vernon's detergent, faintly floral and clean. The blanket was heavy and warm. Outside, a car drove past, tires hissing on wet pavement. Sleep came like November rain, steady cold, and finally merciful. For the first time since August 15th on that island, I slept without nightmare or vigilance. No dreams of being abandoned. No waking at 3 a.m. to check that doors were locked. No rehearsing testimony or reviewing evidence or planning next moves. Just sleep. Deep and dreamless and complete. I woke at sunrise for the first time without panic. The bedroom was quiet. Gray morning light filtered through curtains. Rain had stopped sometime during the night. I reached for my phone out of habit. The screen showed 17 missed calls from a blocked number, and 1 voicemail. I stared at the notification. My finger hovered over the delete button, almost deleted it, almost. The evidence clerk slid a plastic tub across the counter, containing everything Corbin had stolen and abandoned. The voicemail had been from Detective Hayes, brief and professional. Evidence recovered from storage unit. Available for pickup at King County facility. Plea discussion scheduled with prosecutor next week. Call back to confirm. I had called back. Confirmed both. Now I stood at the evidence window on a Tuesday morning, watching the clerk check items against an inventory list. She was maybe 30 efficient movements, the practiced neutrality of someone who had processed thousands of personal property returns and had learned not to ask victims how they felt about getting their stolen items back. "Sign here for personal property return," she said, sliding a form across the counter. "Items recovered from defendant residence August 23rd. I signed. She checked my identification against the case number, then pushed the tub toward me. Inside my father's Omega watch, crystal scratched, but still running. The Leica M6 camera in its leather case. 17 pieces of my mother's silver dinner service wrapped in evidence bags. And at the bottom, in a small plastic envelope, Margaret's wedding ring. The watch still ran. The silver was tarnished, but intact. The ring somehow survived everything. I carried the tub to my car and drove to the house. My actual house. The one I had lived in for 32 years before Corbin tried to steal it. Desmond had processed the paperwork. The locks Hugh Stafford installed in September still worked. The place smelled stale from being closed up, but it was mine. I spent the afternoon at the kitchen table polishing silver, one piece at a time. Fork, knife, spoon, serving dish. The tarnish came off in black smudges on the polishing cloth. Underneath the metal gleamed the way I remembered from Sunday dinners when Margaret would set the table with her mother's silver and tell me to stop checking my phone during the meal. Polishing tarnished silver is archaeology in reverse, not uncovering what was buried, but restoring what was visible all along, just obscured by time and neglect. Each piece restored slowly felt like recovering fragments of a life that almost ended on an island with $23 and no way home. By 4 o'clock, the silver gleamed on the kitchen table. I put the ring on my own pinky finger, too small for any other, and felt the weight of it there. Tangible proof that some things survive even deliberate attempts to destroy them. A week later, I sat across from Prosecutor James Riley in his office on the 7th floor of the King County Courthouse. He was 46, graying at the temples with the measured speech of someone who had handled elder abuse cases for 11 years and had never heard a victim describe justice as proportional rather than maximal. "We have an offer from defense counsel," Riley said, opening a file folder. "Corbin Harrington pleads guilty to grand theft in the first degree and organized fraud. We dropped the elder abuse enhancement and the forgery charge." He looked up to gauge my reaction. I kept my face neutral. Sentencing recommendation, 3 years supervised probation, $22,000 restitution paid in monthly installments, 200 hours community service, permanent felony conviction, on record. Riley paused. "Most victims in your situation want maximum sentence. You're entitled to push for the elder abuse charge and prison time. He would serve 18 to 36 months. "What does the plea agreement accomplish?" I asked. "Permanent felony record. He cannot erase it, cannot seal it. Every job application, every rental application, every background check will show grand theft and fraud. Restitution ensures financial accountability. Probation means 3 years of reporting to an officer drug testing employment verification. One violation sends him to prison. It is proportional," I said. "That is all I need." Riley set down his pen. "Proportional. I do not hear that word often in this office. Or what do you hear? Well, maximum. Vindication. Blood." He leaned back in his chair. "You spent 3 days on an island believing you would die. Your son orchestrated that. He stole your property, forged documents, bribed a notary, tried to stage your suicide. Most people want him destroyed. Destroying him will not restore the 3 days I spent believing I would die, I said. The felony record ensures consequences. Restitution repairs financial harm. Probation provides oversight. Prison time beyond that is excess. Riley studied me for a long moment. Why proportional? He tried to kill you. Most people want blood. I thought about the 17 pieces of silver on my kitchen table, about Margaret's ring on my finger, about sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, about choosing to delete Corbin's message without responding. Prison will not give me back what I lost, I said. 3 years of probation and a permanent record means Corbin lives with consequences. He is accountable, but he is not destroyed. That is the difference. The difference between what? Between justice and revenge. Riley looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language, and maybe I was the language of someone who had survived death and discovered that survival changes what you need from justice. Proportional is the only word that distinguishes justice from revenge. I continued. I want justice. I want accountability. I want him to carry a felony record that reminds him every single day of what he did. But I do not want vengeance. Vengeance does not restore anything. It just creates more damage. Riley made a note in the file. You understand this means no prison time unless he violates probation. I understand. And you're satisfied with that outcome. Satisfied is not the word. But it is proportional. That is enough. Riley nodded slowly, then slid the plea agreement across his desk. I will need your signature approving the terms as the victim in this case. I picked up the pen. One more thing, Riley said. Your son's attorney wants to deliver a statement to you before the plea hearing. It is not required. The choice is yours. I told Prosecutor Riley I did not want to hear whatever statement Corbin's attorney had prepared and scheduled a meeting with my will attorney instead. Some conversations serve no purpose. Whatever Corbin wanted, said through his lawyer, would not change what had happened or what would happen next. The plea hearing was scheduled for December 3rd. I would attend sign where required and leave. Everything else was noise. Richard Taft had drafted estate plans for 40 years and thought he had seen every variation of family revenge through inheritance, but naming a foundation office after the person who tried to steal the estate was genuinely new. "You want the foundation office named after him?" Taft repeated, looking up from his legal pad. "After what he did? Would not as an honor," I said. We sat in his Bellevue office on a gray Tuesday afternoon, rain streaking the windows behind his desk. As a reminder, every person that office helps will be someone he tried to become an elder abuse survivor who needs legal protection. The name will mean something different than he intended. Taft made a note, shook his head slightly, continued writing. The house is currently valued at $850,000. After your death, the full value transfers to establish the Cascade Elder Protection Foundation. The foundation's primary office, located at 4725 Cascade Ridge Drive, will be designated the Corbin Harrington Memorial Office. Correct. And Corbin Harrington receives nothing. Nothing. I confirmed. Complete disinheritance. I want that language explicit. No challenge provision. If he contests the will, any bequest he might otherwise have received, and there is none, is reduced to $1. Taft wrote for another minute, then looked up. This is permanent. Once you sign, changing beneficiaries requires drafting an entirely new will. I understand. You're certain. I thought about the island. About 3 days waiting for rescue that never came. About discovering the deed of gift and the stolen furniture and the fake suicide note. About adoption papers presented as evidence in a courtroom. I am certain justice in estate planning is architecture. You build something that outlives you, hoping the walls you leave behind protect people you will never meet. The house Corbin tried to steal would become sanctuary for people he tried to victimize. Poetic and permanent. I signed my name with an unwavering hand. The ink dried quickly. I would not be here forever. The house would outlive us both. Now it had a purpose beyond shelter. 3 days later, I drove past Corbin's apartment complex by accident. I had been taking a different route home from the grocery store, avoiding construction on my usual street, when I recognized the building. A rental truck sat parked in the fire lane with hazards blinking. Corbin was carrying boxes down the exterior stairs. He looked thinner, older, moving with mechanical precision, but no energy behind the movements, like someone going through motions that no longer meant anything. I pulled to the curb 2 buildings down and watched. Another box, then another. A lamp. A garbage bag stuffed with what looked like clothes. Everything loaded into the truck bed without care for organization or breakage. The movements of someone who had stopped trying to control outcomes. Saskia sat in the rental truck passenger seat staring at her phone. Not helping. Not leaving. Just present in the way furniture is present, occupying space without purpose. Evicted, I realized. The legal fees had consumed whatever savings they had. The felony conviction made finding new rental difficult. Landlords do background checks. I sat in my car with the engine running heat on low groceries in the back seat. I had everything Corbin had tried to take. The house, the property, the legal victory, the moral high ground. Margaret's ring on my finger, my father's watch on my wrist. I slowed, but did not stop. What would I say? What was there left to say? I pulled back into traffic and drove the rest of the way home. In my garage, I turned off the engine and sat with my hands on the steering wheel. The concrete smelled like motor oil and dust. Through the door to the kitchen, I could see the table where I had polished 17 pieces of silver. The house where I had lived for 32 years. The house I had fought to keep. The house I was already planning to give away. Seeing Corbin evicted felt empty. Not happy. Not sad. Just done. How do you celebrate victory when winning means watching someone you raised from age 3 lose everything? The legal system had given me justice. The judge had ruled. The plea agreement ensured accountability. The new will guaranteed legacy. I had won every battle and secured every objective. But sitting in my garage watching November rain start to fall again, I felt nothing that resembled triumph. This is not victory. This is survival. That was the truth I had been avoiding since the trial ended. Survival is not the same as winning. Survival means you did not die when someone tried to kill you. It means you fought back and protected yourself and ensured consequences. But it does not mean restoration. It does not mean healing. It does not mean you get back what you lost. I had survived, I had fought, I had won, and I felt empty. Sometimes survival is the only victory available. Not the victory you imagined when the fight started. Not triumph or vindication or the satisfaction of righteous anger. Just the quiet, exhausted knowledge that you are still here, and they did not destroy you. That would have to be enough. I gathered my groceries from the back seat, milk, bread, coffee, vegetables, that would sit in the refrigerator until I remembered to cook them. The ordinary maintenance of a life that continued whether I felt victorious or not. I walked into the house through the garage door, set the bags on the counter, and stopped. An envelope sat on the kitchen table. White, standard size, no postage, no return address. Just my name written in black ink across the front. Handwriting I recognized instantly from 30 years of birthday cards and school permission slips and grocery lists left on the refrigerator. Corbin's handwriting. The letter said nothing I could use, so I folded it back into the envelope and placed it in the drawer beside the torn remnants of the letter I had never sent. 3 paragraphs in Corbin's handwriting. No apology. No explanation. just weather observations and the address of his new apartment, and a comment about how probation check-ins felt bureaucratic and cold. Neutral sentences arranged like furniture in an empty room filling space without meaning anything. I read each line once slowly, the way you read a document you already know contains nothing useful. Then I closed the drawer on both letters, his and mine, the one delivered and the one destroyed. The conversation between us had already ended in a courtroom 3 weeks ago. Whatever language remained was insufficient for what had happened between us. Vernon arrived 3 days later with 2 beers and the good instinct to say very little. We sat on the front porch in December afternoon, light shoulders hunched against the cold, watching the street in comfortable silence. After 40 years of friendship, Vernon understood the difference between presence and conversation. He provided the first and withheld the second until I was ready. "To Mariners need better pitching," he said eventually. "They always do." True. We drank. A car moved slowly through the intersection at the end of the block. Somewhere behind us, a neighbor's dog voiced its opinion about something only dogs could perceive. Vernon set his bottle on the porch railing and looked at me sideways. "You've already decided, haven't you, about the house?" He had not been told. But Vernon had known me long enough to read decisions before they were announced. "So the foundation will inherit it when I'm gone," I said. "Richard Taft has the documents, but I've been thinking about the time between now and then. How much time do you plan on giving yourself?" "Enough, not too much." He turned his bottle slowly between his palms. "Running toward or running away?" "Neither, just going." He considered that for a moment, then raised his beer in my direction. I raised mine back. We drank without toasting to anything specific which felt exactly right. Some departures don't require a ceremony. They require only honest acknowledgement between two people who have been through enough together to say goodbye without making it smaller by dressing it up. He stayed another hour, left with a handshake that lasted 3 seconds longer than usual. I watched him walk to his car and did not call after him. Some goodbyes are better simple. December 15th, 5 in the morning, cold and entirely clear. I moved through the house one final time with no urgency and no sentiment, just attention. The kitchen where the silver had been polished back to brightness. The bedroom where sleep had finally returned without weight behind it. The living room where 30 years of ordinary evenings had accumulated into a life. The back office where a deed of gift had once sat centered on the desk, like a trophy for crimes not yet discovered. My house. 32 years of it. Every wall and window familiar as my own handwriting. I packed what mattered warm weather clothes in one suitcase. Margaret's photograph in my breast pocket. My father's Omega on my wrist still running. The Leica in its leather case. Margaret's ring in my front pants pocket where its weight was constant and reminding. And in my right hand, the small steel key, the one sewn into my belt, the one that had powered everything on the island, the one that had started all of this from that end. The front door locked behind me with a clean, final click. The Uber arrived at 6:15. Young driver, coffee in the cup holder, music low and forgettable. He asked where I was headed, and I told him the cruise port, and he nodded like it was ordinary, which it was for him, which was fine. I did not look back as we pulled away from the curb. Not from bitterness. Simply because there was nothing more the house needed to show me. By 2 o'clock, the ship was moving south through Puget Sound, and I stood at the aft railing watching Seattle compress itself into shapes, and then into suggestion, and then into the kind of memory that no longer requires effort to maintain. I held the mechanical key over the railing. No words, no ceremony. I opened my hand. It dropped into gray water and disappeared without drama, the way important things often do when you finally stop holding them. The ship continued moving. The wake spread and flattened. Seabirds curved overhead and then peeled away toward shore, toward everything I was leaving behind. I turned back toward the cabin. Behind me, Seattle dissolved into December mist. Ahead, the water was open and entirely undecided. I had survived an island, a sun, a courtroom, and a drawer full of letters that never needed answering. Now I was choosing, not fleeing, not escaping, but genuinely choosing to go somewhere the story could not follow. The ship turned south and I let it. And to you listening to my story, remember this. I spent 35 years building a life, raising a son, trusting without question. I never imagined the person I loved most would try to destroy me. Don't make my mistake. Don't confuse love with blind faith in people who haven't earned it. I learned the hard way that family justice sometimes means protecting yourself from those who should have protected you. This grandpa story isn't about revenge. It's about survival. The lesson I carry forward is this: proportional consequences distinguish justice from cruelty. I chose accountability over destruction because that's what separated me from my son. Family justice doesn't mean erasing someone, it means ensuring they face what they've done. I believe God put me through this trial to teach me the difference between love and enabling. When someone shows you who they are through their actions, believe them. This grandpa story taught me that survival sometimes means accepting painful truths. And sometimes the strongest act is walking away on your own terms. What do you think? Have you ever faced family justice battles where you had to choose between revenge and peace? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. If this grandpa story resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories of resilience and family justice, subscribe to His Revenge. Your support means everything. Thank you for staying until the very end. Some details in this story were fictionalized for storytelling and reflection. Any resemblance to real events or people is purely coincidental. What matters most is the lesson you take with you today.